Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Athlete's Journey, Winning on and Off the Field, a special podcast series looking at the financial journey of athletes through the eyes of some of Australia's most influential sporting figures. I'm Brent Read. Today I'm joined by four-time Olympian Bronte Campbell and former West Tigers star Chris Lawrence. I played over 250 games in the NRL. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
for having us, guys.
Now, we might as well kick it straight off. We'll start with you, Bronte. As I said, four-time Olympian, swimming, obviously your area of expertise. How did you get into swimming and I guess how did it all start for you?
It started, honestly, so long ago. I'm ashamed to say how long ago. I moved from Malawi, which is a really tiny country in Africa, and I moved to Australia just after the 2000 Olympics. And having just watched those Olympic Games, I just decided, I'm moving to Australia, I better just be an Olympic swimmer. I have no idea. You know, when you're 7, something just clicks in your mind. You're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And for some reason, it just stuck with me. And I just had this incredible drive and desire to do that from when I was 7 years old. And I qualified for my first Olympics 10 years later when I was 17. And it's been my through line through my life pretty much since then, and my main career up until now, which is 23 years later. So pretty wild. I don't know what would have happened if I picked something else when I was 7, but very much one-track mind there.
What about you, Chris?
Well, for me, I always loved footy. I think my parents had to hold me back from playing. Even when I was 4 or 5 years of age, I wanted to play. I had kids down in my street who used to play footy out the front yard, and I always wanted to play with them, and always had a footy in my hand, kicking it around in the back. So never really thought of it, I suppose, as a career until probably 15 or 16. It was always just something I loved doing, and just wanted to do every minute of the day. Come home from school, kick a ball, pass a ball. But yeah, when you get through the system and you start playing, junior reps, and you start thinking, oh, well, maybe one day I might have the opportunity to play, but it's still not a career. It's more just a dream and an aspiration to doing something you love. So, the fact I was able to be able to do that and call it a career for so long, I was very grateful for, and body definitely got banged up through that career. But it was something you love doing, and I'm glad I got to do something that I always dreamed of.
I said four-time Olympian, 4 Olympics, medals galore. Was there a highlight? Is there a moment that stands out for you?
Yeah, there is, and it's not a big showy moment. It's not something that I don't think anyone else would have even really seen, but I've been so fortunate to go to so many Olympic Games and World Championships and Commonwealth Games and stand on top of a dais and hear a stadium all singing the national anthem, these really, really big moments. But my favorite moment in the sport was in 2012 when I very first qualified for the team. And in swimming, there's Olympic trials. If you come first or second, you're on the team. If you don't, then you have to try again in 4 years. It's an incredibly high stakes, high stress swim meet. And this was the last spot available on the team in the 50 freestyle, and I had to come first or second. And I was up against a world champion, Commonwealth Games record holder, and a Commonwealth Games champion, and I had to beat out some of these people, some of whom had been watching swim since I was little. And my older sister finished first in that race, and I finished second. And that moment where we turned around and looked at the scoreboard, and you can see a 1 and a 2 next to our names, and we'd always dreamt of going to the Olympics together as well. So it was this really, really special moment. And I've never been so happy after a race. It's not my best time I've ever done. It's not even the best race I've ever done. But that feeling, that little 7-year-old to then being 10 years later, and that big dream coming true was it was super, super special. And I've never forgotten that. Nothing's ever gotten better than that.
What about you, Chris? Winning comps, I imagine.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I debuted the year after, you could probably say I was a bit of a curse, but I've struggled a bit ever since. But definitely, our debut is always one as a footy player, so I definitely have to say that. But one for me was 2011. I was fortunate enough to play in the Four Nations tour and play 4 or 5 test matches for Australia, and play in the final. We won. It was Darren Lockyer's last ever game, so that in itself was really special. But for me, it was extra special because the start of the year was dislocated my hip and had pretty serious injury. And there was a moment within the first couple of months I thought that was career over. Basically got told that I had the potential to lose blood flow to the hip and had to wait 3 months. And it was really a tough mental recovery because of the unknown, and I really had to apply myself. And, at best case, it was, miss the year and come back the year after. So for me, I suppose, to put in that hard work and not only get back on the field that year, but to then play well enough at the back end of the year to get picked for Australia in the squad, and then play well enough in the first game to hold my spot and then play in the final was all, I suppose, the accumulation thing. So I think it was just more rewarding. Obviously, it was awesome winning, and playing for Australia, but more so much for the things I've had to overcome to get to that point. That was probably across my footy career is probably the proudest moment.
You touched on the injury then. I remember that injury when you got it. It was quite really severe at the time, quite scary. And are they the biggest setbacks you had in your career, the injury issues?
Yeah, definitely the injury issues. The two big ones, that one, which was, again, likened to a car accident, which, a few players have sort of had, and, it doesn't tickle. It's very, very painful, definitely the most painful injury I've had. But it was a lot of the unknown. Once you go to the hospital and you get put under and it gets back in, the following weeks after, the pain of it's not too bad, but it's just the unknown and some of, getting back and not knowing when you can come back and what the repercussions of that was. And then later on in my career, really later on, I had a, really significant facial injury, a head clash at training that essentially broke every bone in my face. I think 13 bones all up broken, and had to have 12 plates, put in my face. And that, for different reasons was really tough, because it was the back end of my career. I thought that was it. I was stuck in New Zealand because we were training at the time. So had to sort of wait there because I was worried about me losing sight, on my flight back because of swelling to my face, and just the unknown of when to get surgery, what to do, because that was a more rare injury. So again, likened to a car accident. But I think, when you look back at every challenge and setback you have, whether you're an athlete or anyone goes through things, they do happen for a reason. I look back at, I think, the hip injury taught me just to focus on what you can control. And I just use a lot of the same strategies that helped me get my mind right from that injury to the facial injury. And I definitely think I would have struggled to overcome that facial injury if I hadn't had to go through, some of those earlier setbacks early in my career. I definitely wouldn't have come back and played, let alone, I suppose, recover, physically and mentally as well as I did. But yeah, that was definitely the most challenging periods of life. But like any athlete, they have, and it's most of the time it is all to do with injury, and having to deal with that. Not only the injury, but the setbacks, the unknown, and how you're going to come out the back end of it.
What about you, Bronte? I mean, obviously the injuries are different, but you still suffer injuries in your sport.
Yeah, I'm not getting hit as hard, and I definitely don't have any of my injuries that were likened to a car crash or have my whole face broken. So I feel like I've got nothing to complain about. But I mean, I think I've had a lot of injuries over my career: hip, shoulder, neck, back, wrist, elbow, knee, calf. But the calf one's superficial. But some of them, particularly my neck and shoulder, took a lot of management, and there were nerve injuries and ended up on nerve drugs and whole heap of things that it probably took about 2 or 3 years to get a handle on it. And like Chris was saying, it is a lot more about the unknown of how do you tackle this big level of uncertainty. And I think that goes beyond sport into everything that I do now, is stepping into these areas where there's lots of uncertainty. When I first got injured, I really wanted to lock down on the things that I already knew worked and stay on the solid ground, even though the environment had changed and the situations had changed. So I now try to open up a little bit and be a bit more creative under that big uncertainty. But it's hard because you don't know how things are going to turn out. And I had to completely change how I trained. I had to completely change my stroke in my last preparation. And those big changes can be quite terrifying because you're like, well, I knew what worked before, even though it's not 100% working for you because you're in a lot of pain. So it can be tricky. So definitely picked up on that from Chris. It's a very mentally loaded thing to do, to go through injury. It's really physical, but it's the mental load of always calculating what should the next step be and trying to figure out a way to get around this problem, which to be honest helps me in business now. But like you said, maybe things happening for a reason. There's definitely things I've learned from injury which I would never I would never have learned otherwise. I mean, I just told you how like single-minded I can be sometimes. So 7 years old, want to go to the Olympics, like start doing that thing to go there. Injury like stopped me from being quite so one track. I think single-mindedness can be good, but it can also be a strength overdone.
I was going to say that, like early in your career, when did you just sort of realise or didn't put all your eggs in the one basket? Were we always, with swimming and rugby league, we always have other things on the boil, or were you completely committed early in your career to those things? When did you sort of realise I need to start preparing for life after this?
I mean, I guess I kind of always was. I mean, swimming is not necessarily a career. It's not a very financially stable thing. It's not something that people were used to do for a long time. Like the youngest swimmers are sort of around 16, 17, and then a lot of them might be retired by the time they're 23. That's not a career. That's just 6 years of your life. So it wasn't something that was ever a thought that you could do long term. When I first qualified for my first Olympics, there was only one person who'd done 4 Olympics, and now there's 5 of us. So we're kind of completely changing how the sport exists, and there's like kind of a number of reasons for that. So it was always for us, like you're always going to have a life after sport. It's kind of a weird thing for any sport, even if it's not swimming, if it's rugby league, if it's anything, like there's a timeline to that and you know it's going to end. So I always was doing well at school and studying at uni and stuff, but my number one focus was always on swimming. And for years when I had Olympic years and things were way too hectic, I wasn't studying at uni during those years. And I don't think you can have balance all the time. You can try bring it into like more of a long-term view of your life when you're an athlete, but there's going to be periods where it's completely unbalanced and completely skewed towards getting that one single goal done. And for us, like that really focuses a lot around Olympics because it's once every 4 years. It's 1 minute every 4 years. It's a pretty wild thing to push towards, but it's such a narrow window and such a narrow success margin. 0.01 of a second is the margin between between places in the pool, and like that when you blink it's 0.1, so it's like a tenth of that once every 4 years. So there's not going to be balance in that all the time, but I was always doing school and doing other things on the side as well, just also for like my brain to stay alive, because we do a lot of up and down in the pool.
Chasing the black line, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Chris? Did you always have some balance in your life, or because you got selected in first grade from memory really young, didn't you?
Yeah, in high school. So it was probably 20 minutes after my first game where my parents first of all congratulated me, but reminded me that I had a HSC exam the next day, and to make sure I focus on that. And the footy doesn't last forever, and I still remember that moment because I really think that set me up with a mindset to always make sure, not necessarily to have a plan B, but that it was important to, take your mind away from sport, that, sport was good and that was one thing, but by playing first grade, it didn't have to be everything. And so from then on, as I said, I flew back after my first grade game of a Sunday afternoon in front of 40,000 people. The next day I'm, driving into school, and camera crews are following me in, and I'm trying to go into an exam, and they're, chasing me in, and, for 24 hours earlier, no one knew who I was. So it was a really, I suppose, tough transition on that sense in terms of the exposure and the attention. And for me to escape that, because I wasn't someone who particularly liked any of that, I actually found, focusing on finishing my HSC that year is a really good distraction from that. And we talk about the ups and downs of sport, go from winning a game in your debut the following week. We then travelled to Melbourne, played Melbourne, and we got absolutely tailed up. So it was a very harsh lesson about week to week how things can change. And for me straight away, I just found, being able to go, okay, well, I'm going to put that hat on and focus on finishing my HSC, and I did that, and then got into uni, and then pretty much from then on in, I had something else to focus on. I had my challenges, and definitely had some really good and some definitely really bad experiences with education. doing and playing sport. But I definitely agree with Bronte. There's different points in time it can't be balanced. There's got to be times that you're all in on your sport because that is, your number one focus. But there's also times that it is a really good way to allow you to switch off from sport. Whether you're injured, whether you're got contract issues, if your form's down, it can put things into perspective by building some wins away from sport and building the confidence to know, okay, I have skills that I'm not just a footballer, I'm not just an athlete, I'm more than that. I've got these other skills, which has definitely helped me throughout my career, and now has led to being able to build a business off the back of it.
Do you remember your first paycheck?
I did. Well, I had to sign. I wasn't getting paid prior to my debut, and when I got told 2 days earlier, it was only because it was an injury to one of the players. I was only going to travel up to Brisbane as a reserve player, just a bit of experience. I think Paul Fadawira got injured. Tim Sheen said, "Looks like you're playing." I wasn't 18, so they had to rush my dad from work to sign a contract for me because I wasn't 7, and quickly get an NRL contract registered. I don't think it was any sign. I think it was just match payments. It was when I got. I think the match payments come through at the end of the year. When we talk about when did you know that this is a career? Even though I knew, playing first grade, you got paid and everything like that, it was all just about doing something you love. And then when obviously those match payments coming through at the end of the year, it was like, oh, I'd love to keep doing this forever.
It's different. Swimming's different, right, Bronte? I mean, the money, you need to succeed to get the money, whilst rugby league players, they get signed before they've really climbed a mountain, and then on the basis that they've got potential to climb that mountain. But swimming, it's a much different sport in that respect, yes?
Yeah, it's incredibly different. It's very uncertain. So there's one meet every year, and how you perform at that meet determines how much funding you get that year. There's no contracts, there's no employment, there's no super, and there's absolutely no certainty. So how you do within a minute every year pretty much determines how you survive for the rest of the year. But as Chris said, this being a dream for pretty much every swimmer, and for myself personally, it's way more about that. And it's just surviving until you get to a place where you're thriving. And the bank of mum and dad definitely does a lot for the young athletes. I'm just trying to remember when you asked Chris, when was your first paycheck? I'm trying to think if I can even recall that. I think when I first joined the team, maybe the athletes were getting paid $12,000 a year. So it's not a lot to survive on, but it's never been about that. It's always been about the love for the sport. And then as we progressed from then, it's the funding situation has changed where people are able to survive, and then if you're getting prize money, then you're able to really thrive. But it also relies on those outside sponsors, and the success relies on that. So it is really built into success, but ongoing repeatable success as well. If I had a year off or was unable to compete for injury, I would basically fall off the funding because I wasn't able to perform. So it can be pretty brutal, but it's as I was talking about with uncertainty before, it's actually really heightened my appetite for that. I went and worked at a consulting firm, and I was getting this actual paycheck every month. I think they were giving it out, and I've never had that. I've never had monthly payments in my whole life. I was like, oh, this is so much easier. I can literally see it coming in these chunks. Sometimes I might get paid twice a year, sometimes I get paid once a year, sometimes I get paid in quarters, and there's some money sitting there, but half of it's tax and half of it's to last you for the next year. And it's I was this is so much easier. I can't believe, is this what everyone does? I'm assuming NRL's not actually quite like that, but it's just a very different, it's different from the business world for sure. But it taught me to tolerate uncertainty and to budget really, really well.
I was going to say, how did that, because that would impact your financial decisions, right? When you don't know when the next paycheck, if that's the right word, when it's going to come. I mean, how did that impact on your financial sort of methodology? Or
I actually think my methodology was more informed by how I grew up. I came from a very impoverished country, moved to Australia with a family that had 5 children, one of which is incredibly high special needs, who knew no one here and had to start again from scratch. So we grew up with like very, very little in our family. And so I actually never had a problem with saving. It's more as I've like gotten more mature in my career, that it's then like, okay, how else do we want to use money? Or like looking at like wealth management. That sounds like such a wanky term, but even just like looking at like what are good uses for this money? Like in my head as I was growing up when I was really young, my, I guess, methodology was just like, just save it all, just keep it in a safe place. And it's like, maybe a bank account is not actually the best place for everything to be all the time, is something then that I had to like step around and explore and look at other things as I got older. But like as I was training and competing, it was very much like, yeah, if you can put some stuff in a bank account, because you actually never know what's going to happen and when you're going to need to use that, and it needs to be quite liquid. But I'm now not at a point where I'm competing every single year, and I've got other things outside of the pool where I'm able to earn money in other ways. So it's a little bit easier to make forward plans. But that's another reason why like athletes in Olympics, it's very difficult for them to keep going for a long period of time, because like no one does very much planning when they're 17, but by the time you're 27, you're at a different stage of your life.
Was there a moment where you went out and both of you actually, where you went out and bought something, and afterwards you thought, or that taught you a lesson, that was really silly, I shouldn't have done that, or made a bad investment, or...
I don't think in terms of buying toys or anything like that. I definitely, had investments, definitely a lot of bad investments that I've had. Some poor decisions on me, others poor decisions by others, or just circumstance. Probably too many that, I'd be happy with, to be honest. But maybe the odd, spending too much on a holiday and things like that. But, you always, you look back and look at, okay, what could I have done better in any, instances, in terms of, training, sport. And there's definitely, financial decisions, would have made differently, with, I suppose, right education and support around. I think that's like anything. If you don't have, say, as an athlete, the right coach and right support, you can do, the best you can individually, but you're never going to be able to reach your potential. And I think the same can be said within business, the same can be said with finances. I definitely know from a business point of view now, having, growing a business away from sport, I need guidance because, as it starts to grow, I'm constantly going into uncharted territory where I don't know how to take it to the next step. And if, I can figure it out by myself, but I'm definitely going to make a lot of mistakes in the way, and it'll be a lot easier if you have mentors and have people that have been there and done that can support you.
What about you, Bronte? Was a decision you made financially a thought that you learned a lot from? I
think for me, it's more thinking about this a little bit earlier in my career and life, and like looking at other options. Like my rudimentary understanding of finances was like, put it in a bank account and keep it safe there and don't spend it. Like that's a very, very basic understanding of finances. And I kind of wish I'd looked at it a little bit more earlier in my career and talk to experts. Like it's kind of insane that people would just instinctively understand what the best thing to do with their money is. But knowing that you can talk to people that can like coach you and guide you as it is in sport would be really useful. And there probably was that stuff around. There was probably athlete support and people reaching out and being like, oh, if you're an athlete and you want to get on top of your finances. And I definitely did not take advantage of that. I was like, I don't want to get on top of my finances. I don't want to think about my finances. I kind of wish that I'd put more thought into it earlier and been more strategic with it. And it doesn't have to be boring. It can't, like, now that I'm sort of in that world a little bit more, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Like there's so many different like levers that you can pull in different directions, and you can really think about like for yourself, like what does my strategy look like for 10 years time, and like what do I think is the best way to get there with this person's advice and this person's input. And it's like it feels more like training then. It's more interesting as opposed to like what I thought it would be, which was probably just like making me do a budget, which I wasn't really that interested in doing.
You both mentioned your parents, interesting, because you mentioned your father with the contract and you mentioned your mum and dad. Well, I assume people have shaped your financial outlook. Like how important were they in shaping the way you look at finances and money, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I think for my parents, they worked, they didn't come from much, and they worked for everything. So I think as much as the finances, you got to see the work ethic and how hard they work for everything. So very much appreciated anything that, we were given, whether it was being able to go down the coast on a holiday, not being oblivious to, the cost of that and knowing that comes from a lot of hard work and savings and things like that. So I think the biggest lesson that my parents taught me was obviously being grateful and, being able to work hard to be able to save that money, to be able to provide, different, things and doing it over a long time. I think, it doesn't happen overnight and it's something that you have to work at consistently, all the time to be able to do. And, as I said, there's, plenty of elements of that, being able to, take in, to my, not only my career, my business and, and post career as well.
What about you, Bronte? Your parents pretty pivotal in your outlook in that respect, in the financial respect?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's where I first learnt any attitude towards money. And as I said, moving from Africa to Australia was an incredibly big strain on my family. I was 7 years old at that time, but acutely aware of how hard that was for my family and how hard they had to then work after that. And never taken it for granted that I get to do this thing that I really, really love, that I chose that I wanted to do, and I've been able to earn like a great living off of it. Like that is just so unique and so sought after. My dad's is an accountant. He's a brilliant accountant, but it wasn't something that it wasn't his dream to be an accountant. He had many other things that he would have wanted to do, but he did that and he worked and he provided for an entire family. There's 6 of us other than him that he was providing for. So it's definitely something that I don't take for granted because I saw how hard he worked. My mum's also a nurse, but she was sort of caring for 5 children and my younger brother who requires full-time care as well. Even though he's 26 now, he still requires a full-time carer. So it's been really, really interesting how that sort of shapes your perception of hard work and money, and that things that I think I sort of thought that it only comes from like things that are really difficult, and while sport is difficult, it's something that I chose to do. So I've sort of never lost sight of like the gratitude of that I get to wake up every day and do something that I chose to do, which is it's pretty unusual across the world. So many people wake up and they have to do hard things, but they didn't choose to do them. So it sort of keeps everything in perspective. Like you have to go swim a few laps, like boo-hoo, you can't.
How would you compare the way you handled your money early in your career? Well, you're still going, you haven't retired yet. So to the last sort of few years of your career, how do you what was the contrast in the way you handled your finances from the beginning to sort of the end and near the end of your career?
Yeah, I think for me, I had some, I suppose, really good people around me early, but I did have some really bad investment decisions. Again, my first 3.5 years of savings of, all my match plans, all we talked about, and on very, not like some of the minimum wage contracts are now, not a lot of money, but every single cent I saved, then went the smart route, got some, advice and got advice to go, invest with a stockbroker and they, in 2009 global financial crisis and all gone. Snap a finger. So pretty much wiped out my first 3.5 years where again, and then for me, that probably got me into a couple of years of uninformed optimism that I could do it myself, which again led me to some, bad investments, whether it's, getting led down the wrong path by people who probably didn't have your best interests at heart, business deals with people the same thing that didn't have your interests at heart. So probably then towards the back end of my career, it was a bit more safeguarded with that. And by that stage, I definitely, I'd started my own business from scratch, off my own bat and had built into something something where I could see not only a career, but I could see something I could scale and grow and build my own asset. And for me, that was probably where I thought, this is going to be my opportunity, for all the bad, I suppose, investments that, whether that's poor decisions myself, whether that's poor advice, or just not having the right people around me that I knew that I could, put into, because number one, it was not only investment in my skills, but an investment in an asset of myself that I could forge a career from, make an impact with other people, and then potentially, down the track, reap the rewards of.
What about you, Bronte? The difference between the start to now, I guess.
Yeah, I think the start was like me not thinking about it at all. And to be honest, like when you think about investment, there was not a lot that could have been done there. It was like reinvest in yourself to keep yourself going. But I also didn't think about it beyond that. Like it was never something that I thought about strategically at all. And now later in my career, any of the investments that I've done, whether it's in property or in companies, has all been done through like people that are quite close to and that I know fairly well, or through like there's an athlete investment group that I'm part of called AV, and they're brilliant, and you get to like pick the companies and meet founders and sort of be quite close to it in that way. As well as then I've obviously started my own business, which is then very close to me, and it's an investment quite close there. So they're similar to Chris, is that anything with the right people. For me, it's a lot more about the people that are involved than anything else. And I've had a few people working in finance over the years as well, who have been friends of mine, and would trust those people. So it's for me, it's always about like the correct group of people around me, and then thinking about money a bit more strategically. Whereas like the first probably, I don't even want to say half, the first like 80% of my career was like just thinking about swimming and pretty much nothing else. Like the finance side of it was never thought about strategically for me. Like save as much as possible.
What about the best piece of advice you've received over the course of your careers? Can you pinpoint something?
I mean, best piece of advice probably, I don't think anyone's really given me much financial advice, to be honest. But personally, like the sort of thing that I work on is working with really good people and having like that really strong trust, as Chris was saying before. And personally for me, like operating from a place of like opportunity as opposed to a place of fear. And anyone that would ever talk to about finances, if they were going from like, you have to do this now or you're going to be missing out, like your career is going to end soon and then you're not going to have any more money to do all of this stuff. Like this opportunity has to happen now for you. Like none of that is, I really hate that rhetoric. Anyone that would ever approach or talk to me about anything from that point of view is not aligns with what I think about. It's more about like finding the things that I get really excited about, and then finding the people that align with that and getting this like a excited thing. And like honestly, I'm very conservative in general, so I only get the exciting part of it, and I never invest more than I'm willing to lose, especially when I'm doing early stage stuff.
What about you, Chris?
It's probably a piece of advice I wish I was told, early on in my playing career when I started, earning money as a footballer. But if the advice was, if you don't understand it, don't invest in it. It's definitely something that you don't necessarily have to know all ins and outs, but you do, as a young rugby league player in particular, you do get a lot of opportunities and people coming to you with opportunities, whether it's shares to invest in, whether it's businesses to invest in, or whatever it may be. And I think first and foremost, if you don't understand it, if you're say, if it's a business that you have a passion about, the ins and outs, then definitely. But I definitely think you need to at least have an understanding, but then you also need to have that support as well, because I mentioned, you can be the best athlete you can be, but without the right coach, without the right trainer, you can never reach your potential. And I think you still need, as long as you understand it, you still need that support to be able to, dot the I's and cross the T's with everything, because there's always going to be things you're going to miss as an athlete. And as I mentioned, definitely something that, I wish I knew earlier on, but, I think some of the mistakes you make definitely teach you the best lessons, which is definitely the way I look at things now.
You both had your eye on post-career. Well, as I said, Bronte, you're still going and you've got your eye on post-career already, but you had your eye on post-career as well. Just take us inside the businesses you're both involved in now.
Yeah, so for me, I started my business, whilst I was playing, and it all came about because I had a really negative experience with education. Got into university quite early, and my second year of football, went to university at Sydney University, and they weren't very accommodating. It was, I had a really tough time and got to the point where I could never get to any of the classes, and actually got to the point where one of the coordinators said, look, you got to make a decision whether you want to choose sport or, choose an education. And I said, look, why can't I do both? And, without, I suppose, understanding that, having a professional playing career at that stage, I said, well, unless the university is going to start paying me each month, then I'm going to choose sport for a while. But for me, that left a really negative experience in my mouth because I was really proactive, and that had helped me through my first couple of years of sport, having education. And I then went on my own path and did an online fitness course. So I did that because I thought that's going to build my confidence in learning. I already know fitness. It's just going to help me get back into it. Right around the same time, one of my friends who was at school, and it was like 90% of athletes who rugby league players come through the system, and was at 15, 16 years of age told, you're going to play first grade, sign your first contract and go all in on sport. And, had a number of injuries and just wasn't going to take that next step because of, injuries, and had to look elsewhere. And he went and did his own education, journey, and had some bad experiences. And we thought that, came together and thought, there's nothing built for athletes. He ended up going to TAFE 4 days a week. Professional rugby league players couldn't go and do the face-to-face hours you needed to for university or TAFE. And I knew a lot couldn't do the online courses because it was so hard because you had no support. So how do we create education that's solely built for athletes and no one else that understands the needs and challenges? So in 2012, we decided to do that. We decided to create education built for athletes, and we decided to do that via a fitness qualification and partner with a registered organisation to be able to deliver that qualification. We did that not necessarily thinking every athlete was going to go in the fitness industry, but like it helped us. It was a great confidence builder, a stepping stone to then re-engage you in education, build those skills for that next step in your journey. And at the very least, you had a qualification that you could always go back and rely on. So that business started, and we've now, it's sort of 14 years, 13 years now down the track, 2,000 athletes, professional and elite athletes through fitness qualifications, and led us to then become, towards the back of my career, our own registered training organisation or our own private TAFE. So now we own the course, and we've expanded and grown beyond just working with athletes now to the point we have some state and federal government contracts where we work with school-based trainees. We work with employees within different organisations through traineeships, and then one of our business as well, we do a lot of job skill programs. So people are out of work and need the skills to develop to get back into the workforce. We help deliver that as well. So essentially, their business, one wellbeing and one training. Now the registered arm of the business uses education as a platform to build confidence in order to support with career transition, whether that's from athletes out of sport, school students into the workforce, people into new careers, or people out of work re-engaging in a career. And it's about that confidence is the key, understanding that in everything we do, if we can build our skills and build our confidence, we can often get the things we want to get to. So yeah, being able to, again, from a negative starting point as to the reason why it started, and now being able to, impact a lot of lives, which has been pretty cool.
What about you, Bronte?
I came to it a little bit differently. I had finished my uni degree. I was actually working at EY doing some stuff in sustainability consulting over there and looking at these like really big problems of giant businesses that were trying to pivot to being sustainable. I say pivot because it's not quite the right words. Maybe slowly, very, very slowly start shifting in a direction, and just how complex that can be. And then I got introduced to my co-founders of my business, which is Earthletica, which does sustainable activewear. So I didn't know until I started looking into it in probably 2022 that all activewear is made from plastic because you need that for like stretch and compression. That's like what elastane and all those things in those fabrics are from. And the way it's been made in the past is that's just like new plastic that's created. It's 42 million tons of plastic waste a year, which is a lot. Fashion in general is the third highest contributor to plastic waste in the whole world. So you've got these big industries, and then you've got fashion, which is polluting a lot. And I was looking at it, having just come from EY, looking at it in a really big sense of like, how can a big company actually retrofit sustainability on? And it's really difficult. And here we were looking at, why don't we build it from the ground up into every single part of our business, into our stock practices so we don't have any stock waste, into our design at the start so that there's less plastic going in. We use recycled plastics coming in. We're at 75% at the moment. One time would love to be at 100%. Quality's not there yet. And then how do we recycle it at the end of its useful use and work towards more of a circular system, and sort of build that from the ground up. And that's been really exciting and a whole new different challenge. And for us, sustainability is like very much the core of the company, and reducing all that plastic in the world. I love being in the ocean. I love being around water, and I want those things to be as clean and fresh for the newest generation as we possibly can make it. And this is one way to do it. But for me, like the gear that I wear, it has to get me through an Olympic level workout. So I've grown up in this stuff. I really understand this space. As Chris was saying, like getting into something that you actually understand is a great place to invest, whether it's your money or for me, it's my time and my energy and my money goes into this. So it's a new and exciting thing. When you started selling and getting your first customers wearing it and knowing that you can track your metrics and you can say that we've recycled 16,000 PET bottles now, like that's pretty cool. But it's just a little drop. So really growing that and proving to the big companies that this actually is possible and you can be doing more. 1 out of 50,000 SKUs is not really sustainable.
You're both high achievers, right, in your sporting lives. How do you define success in a business sense?
Well, that's hard, isn't it? Sport's so much easier. You get your score, you get your time, like, like this is good, this is bad. Like it's so much easier. My business partner defines success as like going to bed with a smile on his face every night. And like, that's sometimes difficult to do, but if I can get myself in a place where I'm doing that, I think that's quite a nice holistic way of looking at it, because it goes beyond like I'm doing something that's meaningful and impactful to myself, but it goes beyond just that. It's like also gets into the areas of relationship and the other parts of balance in your life. Like if I'm all in on my business, sometimes I might be up super late and working super hard on it. And then if I do that for 3 or 4 days, I end up being pretty cranky and I'm not going to bed with a smile on my face. It's like, maybe you need to dial it back a bit, because this is unlike my actual career before. It's a marathon, not a sprint when you're building a business. So learning how to find a parameter for that. But yeah, bed with a smile on my face is a nice way to define success, like personally, and obviously that bleeds into all areas of my life.
Yeah, I think I think I can't paraphrase what the quote said, but in terms of success in business, and it really resonated with me, it was that if money was no issue and no object, what would you get up and do tomorrow? And if it was something, within your business, in and around your business, growing your business, that money was no object. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, that's a definition of success. If you would still do that, if you didn't have to, support other people in the business, you didn't have to support your own income and own family because it wasn't an issue, then that's the definition of success. And I think if you can do so whilst making an impact on, a lot of people's lives, then that's a bonus. But I think, we only get one life. I think if we can enjoy what we're doing it, and you're not going to, definitely in business in terms of a balance side, I think there's definitely elements of it that you don't enjoy, and it's definitely a grind. And for athletes thinking of starting a business, I do say I suppose the concept of having your own business, I thought, you can come in and, it's all about balance and you can choose when you work, but it's definitely not that. I look at it as a 5-year preseason to win one game of football. So it's like, well, would you go and do 5 years of constant preseason in one game? But that one game might be a grand final and or an Olympics. So that's very much the I suppose the analogy with that. But if you can do that and be happy and enjoy it every day, knowing that you know that grand final, that Olympics might not come, and still be happy, then I think that's what success looks like.
This might double up, but is there a bit of advice you'd give your younger self right now?
I mean, I think if I was my younger self, I would really want to like stop and acknowledge some of the achievements along the way. Like I've always been so focused on the next thing that I've barely stopped to take a breath along the way, or even acknowledge some of those achievements and celebrate them with the people that were involved in them, because it's not actually all about just me. If I'm alone on top of the podium, that's brilliant, but there's a whole team, and stopping for myself to celebrate it also, it provides an opportunity for the whole team of everyone to celebrate it. And I never ever did that. I think it would have been a nicer way to move through the sport, for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, from a sporting context, I definitely think don't be afraid to make mistakes. Personally, I probably was too afraid to fail or make mistakes early on in my career. I think now, looking at, you know, the quicker you can make mistakes, fail, you can learn from them, you can actually extend yourself, and you're not afraid to push forward. And that's something I've sort of now taken into business, and has really helped me accelerate through that. I suppose from a financial perspective, or setting up, you know, in terms of wealth, it's definitely to have that right supportive team around you, and get to know them, build a relationship, you know, build that trust before you start to obviously, you know, invest all your money. You know, I've made some mistakes even with people and advisors that on paper, you know, had the credentials and things that are out of their control. But I think, like I now in business now, the more you are aligned with the same values and build relationships with, from a business point of view, the same from a financial point of view, that can set it up from a long-term perspective.
So there's something I should have asked you. Excuse me. Have I overlooked something? What is there something, a message about that transition from sport to business or sport to life after sport that you feel like maybe should have been worthy discussing, or maybe I should have asked you about? Is it?
I think for one thing for me is that, and again, everyone says it as a young athlete, like your career goes really quickly, and you know, as a young player, you hear old players say that, yeah, whatever, and you sort of don't really take it in. Like, first of all, I think it does go really quickly. You know, time does go fast, because sometimes you don't stop to reflect when you are an athlete. You're always, what's next? But then when that transition period comes, it is tough. It's tough no matter who you are and what you do, and it's tough for a number of reasons, whether that's, you know, finances, whether that's, you know, your skill set and what's next, or your purpose, whether it's lack of connection, you know, within your team, or whatever it may be. So the more you can be ready for that and tick off as many of those boxes, can reduce that impact, because it doesn't matter, you know, what had happened, you know, and at what stage. You could be an athlete for 2 years or 20 years. It's going to happen. You're going to retire from sport at some stage, and it's going to be hard for a period. But the more you work at it, the more skills you do, and the more you prepare for it, the less impact that will have.
Bronte, you're an interesting point, because you're not retired. Do you, when you hear Chris say that, do you think you're in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of I've been like a foot in both camps, right? So like after the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, I had 18 months out. I honestly didn't know whether I was going to retire or not. At that time, I was working at EY. I was doing all this other stuff outside of the pool, and I was like, great, this is kind of cool. This is great. But then I chose to come back into it. And that was actually really powerful, having two things that I could choose between, as opposed to just like, do I want to keep doing this thing or stop? And that's quite a difficult thing to choose. Like, do I want to keep doing my sport or just like this big unknown thing? But having two things I could choose between was really useful to me at the time. And now I'm sort of in that position again, where I'm not retired, but I'm taking the next year out from competing and full on training. And then I'll make a proper decision about what the next sort of 3 years looks like for me. And again, having things that you can choose between, like Chris was saying, options is really great for that.
Cool. Thanks, Bronte. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for joining us on Athlete's Journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.